Hi everybody, today we are going to be working together to create a dragon, and I have created a template for us to use. And one thing that I want to point out is I photocopied these and the copier did not finish all of the lines. It didn't scan the whole document, so I am just going to go in and fix those lines. I am going to use a black marker just so that you can see it a little bit better compared to fixing it in pencil. So this one, we want to curve up and then back. This is going to end up being the front of our body. Over in here, you can just make the end of the neck however you want that shape to be. So I might just curve it and have it finish like that. And our tail, you'll see that part of it is still showing right over here. So I'm just going to complete that curve. So it kind of just goes like this. And this one, I can pull it right off the edge of the paper so that when I go to cut, I would just start and come in. Now what I get to do is kind of what I like to think of as the fun part, and I get to add some details. I'm going to do it with marker so that you can see it. You should be doing it with a pencil so that you can erase in case you make a mistake. So you can change these lines a bit. This is just a general layout. If you don't want this to be quite so curved, if you want it to be more angular, I'll show you how you can change that. But if you like how it is curved like that, you are absolutely welcome to keep it looking how it is. This is more a guideline, less a you absolutely have to follow it. So I might change my wing a little bit, and I want it to kind of come out and then curve, so I'm making it a bit more angular. And then what I am also going to do is I'm going to add a dot right here. I'm going to make it thicker and come up. So now you'll see this is where like the arm comes out, and then it would turn and come down, similar, almost like to a bat's wings, to be perfectly honest. If I change this one, I want that one to change as well. So I want it to be as symmetrical as I can get it, but it is okay if it's not absolutely perfect. So I am going to keep going and add some details and change this design a bit. Once I have changed the general shape, I will check back in before I start adding in some of my final details. At this point, I have kind of laid out the general idea of what I want my dragon to look like. So you'll notice that I did keep a lot of the lines that I had already drawn, but I've added in a few others to make my dragon look a bit more unique. One thing to notice is, though, that in here, this part is probably going to be a little bit tricky to cut out. So I would not go super crazy with the tiny details because you are going to need to be cutting these out. So I am going to now start thinking about what texture I want my dragon to have. So a lot of times we think of dragons as being scaly and bumpy. However, if you want yours to be fuzzy, you can make it look fuzzy. So I will add some scales onto mine, but if you want to add a different kind of a pattern or design, you are welcome to. I'm adding it in skinny marker instead of using the larger Sharpie, just so that I get a thinner line. Honestly, a pen would be perfect because I'm going to end up coloring over it. I just want these lines to still kind of stand out compared to my coloring. And these are going to take a little while to do because we want to show, hey, you know, the dragon is scaly. It is bumpy feeling, or it is furry feeling, or maybe it is even feathery and you would draw a feathery pattern. Don't press so hard or make them so huge that it's super distracting. But you do want to kind of give the impression that, hey, you know, my dragon has a texture. Also, please remember that we definitely do not want these to be super scary, because we are creating them at school. We want them to be appropriate and not scare some of our younger friends. So if you look here, it genuinely is starting to look more scaly. So I would add this going down the neck, into the tail, and also this is the body area of our dragon. So we would end up filling in just this part. After we cut it out, we'll have to trace our wings again, and make this double-sided as well as our tail, but this part we're only going to have to make scaly once, and I'll address this more in a few minutes after I deal with my head and my tail. Now that I have my head and neck and my tail pretty much finished, I want to address the belly. This is really going to be the underside of our dragon. So on there, I think that they tend to have larger scales. So what I might do is very lightly, I am going to end up drawing a line, and this is just a guideline from the top down to the bottom, because that is where I'm going to end up folding. So we're going to end up folding the whole body in half after we've cut it out. And then what I am going to do is I am just going to add some curves. These are going to be those larger plates almost that we think of snakes maybe having going along their belly. They definitely have larger scales across where their belly is compared to the smaller, more bumpy ones that we think of when we think of petting a snake, like the back of a snake. We think of it more having smaller scales like this. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to make the shape of that scale. So it's not perfect, but it should be a little bit rounded almost, just to help it give almost a better texture so we can see more of what we're dealing with here. And so I'm pretty happy with how that looks. I almost like this a little bit better than up in there, but whatever works. And then around that we would have our larger scales. And again, this is the front, this is the back. Once I have my scales done and I'm pretty happy with my design, what I am going to do is I'm going to start to color. And I am going to recommend, especially for my older students, that you use colored pencils. I am going to work on layering colors and thinking about what I really want my dragon to look like. Notice where I blend colors together, especially in these open parts, you could probably get some really cool effects, like almost like an ombre effect going out from the wings. So I'm going to start to color and I will check in a few minutes. Okay, at this point in my coloring, I kind of have almost what I would consider a base coat down on my coloring. So I have decided that I want the belly areas, so here along coming up the neck and coming up the tail is yellow. The main part of the scales and in here is orange. My wings and some of the tail has pink in it. But I am going to be blending colors together now to really give some cool effects and to try to make my artwork look a bit more interesting. So for example, if I want to darken up the edges where it meets kind of the bones, the bony parts of the wings, I can absolutely darken that up by layering some red over it. You can also add some purple if you want an even darker effect. So I am going to come in and kind of layer in some darker colors to make it a little bit more three-dimensional looking, give it a bit of value. We've talked about value a lot, how light or dark a color is. And I love how colored pencils can really blend together and give us some nice effects in our work. So you see that gives it a much more dramatic feel than just leaving it flat. So I'm going to continue working and adding some shading and blending with my colored pencils, and I will check back in again in a little bit. As I'm working in this area, I want you to notice that I am coloring just right over where those scales are. I am also just adding some brown, but I'm not making it so dark that I don't see the scales or I don't see the orange through it anymore. What I'm doing is just layering it lightly over the orange, because what it's doing is it's just giving it a nice shadow effect instead of just being a flat color. In the red, it did the same thing. So I wasn't trying to make it look like it was being scary or any of that. I really was just trying to give it a little bit more texture, and I can do the same thing in the yellow square, the yellow shapes on the belly. And what I like about this with the brown is that it still kind of gives that yellow tint to it, but it helps it just look a little bit more three-dimensional and makes it more interesting to look at, and helps it look a little bit, even though these are a fantasy creature, it still helps it look a little bit more realistic. Okay, at this point, I think I am going to call this part done for now, and the next thing I need to do is cut it out. As I am done cutting, what I am going to do is I'm going to make sure that I keep my 3 good pieces. So I have my body, my tail, and the head and neck. Everything else should go into the recycling. Keeping your space clean is important, and it helps at the end when you need to tidy up if most of it has already been dealt with. Now we need to talk a little bit about how all of this is going to come together. So your body, we are going to be doing some folding. So you want to watch carefully and really pay attention. We are going to fold this directly in half as best as possible. And remember, if you didn't make your wings perfectly symmetrical, that's okay. Focus more on where the body is. So right here, these line up. So this part right here. And in the back. Okay, so I'm folding that to crease it. Okay, so now if you look at it, it looks like we have the belly across the bottom and the back of our dragon. So I'm going to really do a good job of pressing that down so that we have a nice solid crease, folding that in half. The next thing, and there are really fine dotted lines on the wings, we're going to fold those down. And again, we're going to do this carefully. So you'll see I can just kind of fold that down and crease it. So now on this side it's folded down. This side I still have to do. So I find it easier to kind of have the other wing up and fold it down. If you need to, use the table to help you kind of check out where that line is and fold it that way. So now if we hold it like this, the tops of our wings don't look right because they are still just plain white. So we're going to have to design these and color these just like we did to the underneath of our dragon. So we're not done yet. So I would tend to open it all the way back up, grab that marker or pencil, and get those lines as best you can to match up. and then you would go in and color. And I would use the same colors personally, but if you want to see what it looks like with different colors, so that part of the wing is one color and part of it is a different color, that could work too, and it could potentially look really cool. So that is up to you. So on the bottom I used like the red and the pink, and maybe I want to try and see how it looks with green and blue or something like that. So I would do this. I would also need to end up tracing the head and the tail, because we need to be able to see both sides of that. So when I go to color, I don't need to worry about this part, because remember, this part ends up getting put together. So that's the only part that we're not going to color. Our head is going to end up being tucked inside the body. So if you look this way, it looks right, but this way it's blank. So we're also going to need to trace this, and again, do the best that you can. If it is not absolutely perfect, that is okay. At this point, I have pretty much finished coloring. I could go in and do a better job like I did on this side, but for right now, in the interest of time, I'm going to show you how to put it all together. So you are going to take your head, and notice the wings go this way, so your head needs to go up here. So when I fold the body in half, I can put the head sticking out, and you can choose what angle you want it at. It would be fine if it was like this or down in here, whatever you like. I think I like mine like this. You can glue it in, but you can also just use a stapler. So I'm just going to take a staple, and I'm going to staple it along where I have a line to kind of hide the staple. So if you look really closely, my staple is right along that line, but you barely notice it because I've tried to camouflage it in there. Then you are also going to take your tail. Your tail, we just let it go to the edge of the page. If you want your tail to come down or something like this, you would end up needing to trim your tail. However, if you want it more up, or it can go either way. It can go like this as well. So that's really a personal preference. I think I'm gonna have mine coming out like this, so I'm just gonna trim this tip right off with my scissors. So I'm just gonna come in and trim it off, not too much. I still want to be able to get my staple in there. And I simply get it to where I like it. Hold it carefully, and I might not be able to hide my staple, but I can try. I can see it a little bit more, that's all right. I also want to put a staple right along where the edge of those wings are, just to reinforce that. You could even do two, just below the fold, because I don't want my dragon to fall apart. Now, if you kept some of your scraps at your table, you could even add legs or other attachments to your dragon, but I think these come out pretty cool. So now I have my dragon. I hope you enjoyed following along and making a really cool dragon, and I will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.